Hey everyone, this is Travis Tressler at Play Tennis Gainesville, and I'm going to talk a little bit today about playing tennis in the cold weather. So a few things we'll talk about today is one, hydration, how that's going to be important for us to keep our core body temperature in that cold weather. Two, we'll talk about the clothing we want to wear so we can stay warm, keep that body temperature up. And then three, we'll also talk about some of the strategy behind playing tennis in this colder weather. Before we get going here, little background about myself. I'm actually from Champaign, Illinois, up in Central Illinois, so I have a lot of experience dealing with these cold conditions. Boys high school tennis up there starts in March, so I've played matches in 25 degrees with snow coming down. And while it's not fun, it is doable if you follow some of these steps here. The first thing we need to talk about with playing tennis in cold weather is hydration. So even though we're not going to feel as thirsty as when it's hot out, hydration is just as important. We're still going to be sweating, losing those body fluids, so we need to replenish ourselves. When we're playing, you should be drinking at least 32 ounces of liquid and a mixture of water and sports drinks. Hydration is going to start before we get on the court. So if you start to feel thirsty on the court, it's already too late and that dehydration is kicking in. So you should be drinking before the match, the night before, when we're warming up, in order to stay hydrated and stay on top of that dehydration. When we're staying hydrated, that's going to help keep our body temperature up. So a lot of people think hydration is only important to keep our body temperature down in the hot weather, but our body also uses that water when it's cold to keep that body temperature up. So start drinking water the night before you're playing so you can stay on top of that hydration. Last thing about hydration, cut out the alcohol and caffeine before a match. So I talked about this with hot conditions, but alcohol and caffeine actually increase our chances of getting dehydrated. So the night before, the morning before a match, cut out those alcoholic drinks and maybe that coffee in the morning in order to ensure our best chance of staying hydrated. The next thing we need to talk about with tennis in cold weather is going to be our attire. So I want to start off here by saying wear whatever is going to be comfortable for you. So myself, I could never play in a lot of layers, so no matter how cold it was, I was always wearing a short sleeve t-shirt and shorts. So you can do that, but you need to make sure you're staying warm. However, we don't want to wear bulky winter clothes that are going to limit our movement on the court. Instead of wearing bulky winter clothes when we're on the court, I would recommend wearing thin layers. That way, if we get too hot in a certain layer, if we're wearing a jacket, something like that, you can take off that layer so you're not getting overheated. So if I'm playing, I would probably wear a t-shirt, a dry fit long sleeve of some sort, and then maybe a thin jacket. Likewise, I would wear shorts and maybe a thin pair of sweatpants over that. That way I can take off the layers as I begin to get hot and be comfortable when I'm on the court. Not only is it important that we keep our body warm on the court, we also need to keep our hands warm. When we're playing tennis, it's very difficult to feel the grip and feel us hitting the ball if we're wearing gloves. So I would recommend on changeovers having a pair of gloves that you can put on to keep those hands warm when we're sitting down. However, if your hands are getting too cold while you're playing, I would wear those gloves on the court. Another tip, you can buy some hand warmers to keep in your bag or in your pockets that you can rub together and keep those hands warm without wearing the gloves and restricting your feel on the racket. Last thing we need to talk about is going to be our head. So even though it's cold outside, that sun's gonna be just as strong, and it's actually lower in the sky during the winter months, so that sun's gonna be getting in our eyes a lot easier. So I would recommend wearing a hat, or if you're comfortable, wearing some sunglasses to keep that sun out of your eyes. Also, if you're playing a tournament and you're sitting around, bring a beanie that you can put over your ears on top of your head. We actually lose most of our body heat out of our head. So if we're sitting around not playing, we need to keep our head warm. Finally, I want to talk about strategy for tennis in the cold weather. First thing we need to talk about is stretch out before you play. In the cold weather, it's going to take longer for our muscles to get warmed up, so we really need to be stretched out to avoid injury. So I would stretch at home before the match, when you get to the tennis center, and then right before you get on the court. That way our muscles are ready to go and we're not going to hurt ourselves once we start playing. Another tip for playing tennis in the cold weather is keep your feet moving. If we're standing around being idle, we're going to get cold a lot quicker. So make sure in between points, you're moving your feet, jumping up and down, jogging to the net on a changeover, but keep those feet moving, and that'll keep your body temperature up and help you stay warm on that court. Another thing that happens when we're playing tennis in the cold weather is the ball actually gets flatter and doesn't bounce as much. So when we're playing, if we hit with a lot of topspin, it's not going to be as effective because that ball's not going to bounce as high. So when we're playing, I would recommend using a lot of slice, drop shots, and on our serve, flat and slice serves. That way, the ball will stay low, and that's going to force our opponent to really have to get down and get underneath that ball to hit it. But just keep in mind when we're on the court, that ball is going to be flatter, so we got to be ready to play with that flat ball in the cold weather. The last thing I want to talk about is going to involve racket stringing. So I don't think this is as important as some of the other stuff I've talked about, but it's something to think about if you're struggling to get power in that cold weather. Since that ball's flatter, it's going to be harder to hit that ball with pace. So if we string our racket a little bit looser, maybe drop our tension 2 pounds, that'll help us get more power and we'll be able to compensate hitting with that flat ball. However, if you're comfortable with your tension right now, I wouldn't recommend doing this, but it's something to think about if you're really finding yourself struggling to get pace on your shots. Playing tennis in the cold weather isn't very fun. There's no other way around it. What my dad used to tell me when I was a kid, if it's cold for you, it's just as cold for your opponent. So just don't feel sorry for yourself in that cold weather. Try to enjoy it and make the most of it. If you understand some of the stuff we've talked about, you can actually turn that cold weather into an advantage for yourself. So just remember, 1, stay hydrated, even though we might not feel as thirsty as when we do when it's hot out. Secondly, dress the right way. So bring lots of layers so you can keep yourself warm. And then finally, just remember some of the strategy we talked about. That ball is going to be a little bit flatter, so we're going to have to adjust our game to compensate for this flat ball. Thank you everybody for watching. I look forward to talking to you again soon.